Today on the Relationship Revival Show, I'm joined by Tracy Cox. Tracy is a doctor of divinity, an Ontario licensed clergy, and a spiritual wellness coach and Reiki master teacher. She's a featured author in Reiki Rays and Universal Life magazines, and Reverend Dr. Tracy has been working spiritually with clients worldwide for over 25 years. She uses research from her doctoral dissertation to help them overcome challenges and understand how to improve their lives on all levels. Reverend Dr. Tracy also performs weddings, funerals, and all other spiritual services in her home province of Ontario, Canada. For more information, you can visit her on the web at reverenddratracycox.com. You're listening to the Relationship Revival Podcast with John DeBach, also known as Mr. Spirituality. That's me. I'm your host, giving you insights and guidance from over 10 years in the field of this amazing journey we call romance. On this show, I go over everything you need to know about how to get into a relationship, how to get the most out of a relationship, and sometimes even how to gracefully end a relationship without pulling your hair out and going crazy. And occasionally, I'm even joined by new and old friends who are also relationship experts to bring you guidance and wisdom with new perspectives. Thanks for stopping by. Tracy Cox, Reverend Dr. Tracy Cox, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
You are the first doctor of divinity, the first reverend on the show, and I've focused very heavily for several months on looking at therapists and looking at psychiatrists, even though my show's called, or my nickname was Mr. Spirituality. And
I love that name, by the way. It's a great name.
Thank you. And it informs a lot of what I do. Anyone who's listened to the show for more than a couple episodes know that I was on track to be an Orthodox Jewish rabbi, and I'm still,
which is awesome.
Yeah, thanks. And it's still it still informs a lot of what I do, even though I don't keep a very rigorous Jewish practice. I still have what I feel is a personal relationship to God. And so I was like, you know what? Let's get a little bit more of a voice from someone who takes it seriously and makes it a part of their world. And you yourself are married.
Yes, I've been married for 23 years, almost 23 years. We've been together for 25.
So I guess the first question to kind of start things off is, what role does God and spirituality play in your own marriage?
Well, it is a huge part, because we both, when we got together, I was looking for somebody that actually did believe in God and that had a strong faith. And my husband was like that. So, and he was very much the way that I am, that when I talk about God, I want to have a personal relationship with God. I'm not talking about religion. I'm talking about my connection with divinity, with God, with the angels. It's so important. So if you had somebody that didn't believe the same way that you do about that, if you're passionate, that's going to be a pretty tough nut to crack, I think, in a relationship. Eventually, there's going to be some pushback, I would think. So that's kind of where we started.
Is it part of the dialogue that you guys have on a daily basis or weekly basis?
Yeah, absolutely. I believe that it was, we always would study scripture first thing in the morning. Like, it's always been what I've done forever.
Mm-hmm.
I was very much into the writings when I was a teenager of Catherine Ponder, if you've ever heard of her, Florence Scovel Shinn.
Mm-hmm.
They were metaphysical writers that talked more about God and spirituality as opposed to God and religion, and using it for the good in your life and trying to focus and have God as your co-pilot, essentially, instead of trying to do everything through force of human will, which a lot of the time people fall into the trap of that. So we were coming from the same place, and I think that really built a strong foundation, because like in any marriage, you get a lot of times when the rubber hits the road that things are very stressful, and if you don't have something to rely on together, it can be very difficult.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I agree with you. I think even in my own marriage, sometimes the only thing it felt like we had was that spiritual connection.
Exactly.
And it's like, man, if we didn't have that, we would have been toast,
Sure. But the thing is that that's the connection that we need to build on for a marriage. It doesn't kind of eventually get that way. It needs to start that way.
Yeah.
So if somebody is if doesn't believe the same way that you do, I can't see how you could have a long-term relationship with
Well, let
them.
me ask you this. So I've had this happen a couple times, and it's never easy in my practice where couples been together 10, 20 years, and one of the two of them have either an illness or a traumatic event, or
Yeah.
sometimes out of nowhere they, one time I saw it even just because of COVID, their reaction to something in their life gives them this transformative moment where
Hmm.
they start exploring spirituality, and
Sure,
they kind
absolutely.
of get to a point where they are leaving their partner behind. And so, and
I know what you're
it's
saying.
not at the
Yes,
beginning of
it's
a
difficult.
relationship where you're this devout Catholic who always had a relationship
Hmm.
with God in some way, and you decided to marry a secularist Jew, and then 20 years later you're like, what was I thinking? This is, hey, we came from similar backgrounds, but now I'm
Yes.
in a different place. What would be your, as a coach, as a spiritual counselor, what would be your kind of way to try and save the marriage? Do you try to save the marriage? I mean,
Yeah, I think you do. Because if somebody's been together, they have some common ground. Maybe they weren't into spirituality or religion. Everybody has free will in the way they live their life, and we all have different things that drive us.
yeah,
And if somebody all of a sudden becomes spiritual, I think that you can still work with that if a person decides that they're more secular and they don't want to get into it. But as long as they're not making fun of the person,
sure.
I think it can work.
Well, it's
Right?
interesting that you say that, because I've found, at least in the 3 or 4 times it's come up in my practice, it's the opposite. And as a Jew, because Judaism is loaded with its own, stigmas and stuff. But for what I found is, like, when you're starting on this rise, you're so excited about it that you
Yes.
want your partner in, and so there's more
Of
push
course you do.
from the spiritual side than the other side, because they're used to saying, well, look, if that's what you believe, like, they don't make fun, but the conflict comes from, you don't want to go to this meditative thing with me, you don't want to go to this seminar with me, you don't want to,
Yes.
explore. So that's the
Yeah.
that's the harder part.
I think that that is a very good question. I think that the big part of a functional, healthy relationship with somebody, whether it's your mate or your parent or your child, is that you'll do something where maybe you'll bite your tongue, but you'll just do it to spend time with that
Yeah,
person, and everybody feels good. They don't have to know that you're going, whatever. You're giving of yourself. It's that self-sacrifice that creates the connection between people. So I think that if you can be very generous with whoever you're trying to connect with, and at least have an open mind and listen to them, then that's going to go, 100%. As long as a person can show they're open minded and that they're not making fun of the person for their beliefs, and they're actually experiencing it on some level with them, then that's what life's about. And I think it's true, like when your teenager brings you some memes that ha ha, and you're just looking at it like, but you think it's funny and you laugh and you have a good time, and what do you think this is about?
right,
Right? So it just opens the dialogue in a healthy way.
for sure. I think that's a great
Right?
approach,
Even if
is
you
like,
don't.
try to find the normalcy, try to find that
Yeah.
common ground, try to
Yeah.
bond on the things that you do bond on, it sounds like, is what you're saying.
Exactly, exactly. And not just that, I think that a lot of making people feel comfortable and happy to be alive and all that kind of stuff is using humor, is accepting people's different ideas. And as we do this, people see that they can be comfortable with you and be themselves with you, even if you don't agree with what they're saying. You're being inclusive of them being able to say it, and that's what I find has been a really big problem with what's going on culturally right now, is that people won't even listen if somebody's got a different point of view. They're like, and then they'll, call them a bunch of different names
Hmm.
and shut them down instead of just listening for an open dialogue and saying, I understand that we each have free will and we each are allowed to have different opinions about things and still sit down and break bread together. Like, God never said that we're all going to agree on everything 100%. He said, love thy neighbor. Okay. And if you want to take God out of it, then we can say the golden rule.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I like to do with my clients and couples too is that there's a great meditation, and all it is you think about the fact that if we all use that energy of love thy neighbor, or the golden rule, if you just want to do straight
Hmm.
secular meditation, and just think about embodying the golden rule ourselves, and then embodying it in the way that we contact the direct people that we, hit day to day with our lives. And then if they did that, if all of humanity lived that golden rule, we would instantly be living in paradise again. We would instantly be in heaven again. We would instantly raise the vibration of the world and stop all this nonsense that we're going through right now, because at this point it's just ridiculous. Like, we want peace. We just want to get along. We just want to, be able to look after our kids and our families and let everybody have a nice and blessed life. And that's it. And it's just the time for humanity is to just pull together.
Yeah.
And this is kind of the energy that I'm trying to bring in with people, is just that love thy neighbor energy, just that golden rule energy. Like, it would be a miracle if everyone just began to live that way. You would see something miraculous happen.
Yeah.
And it's not hard. It's just, at least don't hurt people. Don't be mean. It's not like it's a big deal, right?
Don't suck. It's just essentially,
Yeah,
just
yeah,
don't suck.
exactly.
Just go out
So
there and
that's
don't
my
suck
thing
for a
right now.
second.
Yeah, I'm trying. It's funny because you start talking about peace and no more war and only using diplomacy, and all of a sudden people are like, "Oh, what are you talking about? And how can you pray for this person?" And it's like, I can pray for that person because he's a part of humanity, and I want us to all get along
Hmm.
so that we don't get our butts blown off the planet. And, just the fact that it's such a radical idea now, peace, I'm just kind of shocked,
Yeah.
you know? But I'm still going to talk about peace.
Yeah. I think, and listen, there's everybody prays, every religion in the world, no matter how violent they may seem to an outsider. One thing I found is every religion prays for peace. Every single religion.
Exactly. Of
We
course.
all
Of
want it.
course.
It's just somebody has a thorn in their side and kind of
Yeah.
goes a little off the
Oh, I
rails.
think there's a lot of people that are getting a lot out of what they're doing. That's all I'll say.
Yeah.
And we don't know what goes on behind the curtain, right,
Sure.
of the great Oz.
Sure.
So we just have to pray and ask God to take care of it, take care of us, keep us safe, keep our families safe, keep our country safe, and just let Him do His thing, because it's just too big for any of us to do just on our own.
Yeah.
But that's the thing. It's the practical use of prayer
Yeah.
is what I'm all about. So the second that you get stressed about it, I want my clients to instantly pray, as opposed to, oh God, starting to spiral in that worry. Is just instantly pray about it and just talk to God like God is your best friend, and you want to get that information across to him or her, or whatever how you connect. We all connect differently too.
Yeah.
But get that dialogue going,
It's so
because
funny. So
it's so
I'll share a
powerful.
little personal story that I haven't shared before. My therapist, my first therapist, years and years and years ago, saw that I was struggling on this spiritual level, and I wasn't so comfortable articulating in that way. And I was a screenwriter at the time,
Okay.
and there's a lot of rejection and things you deal with in Hollywood and
Yeah.
stuff. And he said, "Well, what do you like to?" And he said, "Well, why don't you have a dialogue with God in script form?" And I said, "Okay." And I went home and I wrote a script, and I came back and I gave him this like 50-page thing. And he's like, "What's this?" I'm like, "This is me talking to God." And he laughed. He goes, "Well, I guess you're not afraid of homework." And I said, "Yeah." I said, "Yeah, that's
That's
true."
good.
But it's funny, like if you don't like talking out loud, there are other ways you can write, you can journal. There are different ways to talk to God,
Exactly,
get in
precisely.
touch
And that's
spiritually.
another
Yeah.
thing. Yeah, I'm working on a course actually on practical prayer, so that people use these different keys that I've found in my own experience and with my clients and members and friends, and they're so easy to do. And like you said, some of them involve writing,
Yeah.
because it is hard for some people to get it out verbally or to even think of it in their head. But the writing puts it down in a way that they can connect to,
Hmm.
And sometimes it's the most powerful way to go. Like, amazing.
When you
I've seen
work
amazing
when
stuff.
you work with clients as a coach or as a spiritual counselor,
Mm.
what do they typically find you for and ask in terms of goals when they start working with you?
Sure. Well, I have a lot of clients that have gone through trying to overcome relationships with narcissists,
Mhm.
because that's been my specialty for the last 10 years, just because I had a lot of people coming to me, and there was a real rise in narcissism at the time about 10 years ago. I think people just became some people became much more self-centered, and I think that that's a lot of the problems that we've got in the world now, is the rise of narcissism.
Mhm.
People just doing things and not worrying
Where do
about
you think
how it
that's coming
impacts
from?
others. Well, I mean, we could go into the way that things are becoming increasingly secular and not religious, you know,
Yeah.
but I don't know. That
So
I
there's
don't
a
know. It's a
suggestion
good
of
question.
maybe that
Yeah,
having to do with it.
it's a
Yeah.
good question. I mean, I know that the people that are more interested in traditional values think that it's because God is out of the school,
Mhm.
and there's no spiritual rudder anymore.
Yeah.
It's all external stuff, right?
I have many,
But who
many friends
knows? I don't know.
living in LA who are atheists, and I have a lot of very dear friends who are non-theists. One thing I always, you have to the humility is like the first thing I look for in somebody, the sense of humility and humbleness. And when I find an atheist or a non-theist who's humble and has that humility, I don't get as nervous, because I tell people,
Yeah.
it's the one thing I'm always nervous is if you see him, especially a man, the male energy. Like if you see a man who doesn't believe in God, you maybe he believes he's God, and it's like there.
Well, yeah, I think that what I find about it is that when you meet an atheist, a lot of the time they are more aggressive with their beliefs to us
Sure.
than like an evangelical
Sure.
whatever, somebody that's a religious zealot, right?
Yeah.
Like they want you to know that there's no
Yeah,
God and that you're an
there
idiot for
has been a
believing in
very
God.
aggressive wave towards that tendencies. I mean, Christopher Higgins and the different,
Exactly.
or Hutch, what's his Hutchins?
Oh, yeah.
There was that like staunch
Stephen
militant
Hawking.
atheism,
Yeah.
right, right, for sure.
Yeah.
I don't like
I just
militant
laugh at them.
anything.
I just I just
Yeah,
laugh because it's a joke.
right.
I mean,
So
I don't
getting
understand the
over, yeah.
payoff. That's the thing, that I don't understand the payoff.
Well, let's get
I
back
don't.
to what you do. So getting over narcissists, and then how do you work
Yeah.
with people like with that? Do you, with prayer and other forms? What's that?
Oh yeah, they don't need to believe in God though. Just doing things like there's simple breathing techniques to calm people
Sure.
down and to get them centered. People have been in a spiral of trauma that can be broken. They need to get away from the narcissist. There's no world where staying with a narcissist is going to end with a happy
Yeah.
ending, because narcissists live and breathe to create drama in everybody around them so that they can just sit back and
Yeah.
laugh.
And if
And
someone does have
that's
narcissistic personality disorder, I think it's important to remind anyone listening that that's not curable. That
no,
doesn't
it
go
doesn't.
away.
They don't think anything's wrong with
Right.
them. They think everything's wrong with everybody else. Now, psychiatrists, I don't know, did you ever read that book by M. Scott Peck
No.
called People of the Lie? It's an amazing, amazing book. And it was, yeah, amazing. And he was a psychiatrist. He's passed away now, but he treated people that were the victims of narcissists, and he treated narcissists, or tried to at least see what was going on. And he just, it was a shocking book. It's hard to describe if you read
Yeah,
it.
I'll check it
He
out.
was also very devout, so he truly felt that they were evil,
Right.
and no amount of change, no amount of treatment was ever going to change
Right.
them, because they don't think that they're wrong. They think that everybody else is, and it's kind of a game to them to trip people up. It's the way that they do business. And M. Scott Peck thought that it was around the age of 6 that there was something traumatic that happened to them, and the way that they reacted was in a narcissistic fashion, and it was successful. So at that age, they learned the manipulation paid off,
Mm-hmm.
and that's how they ended up where they are now. And so because it's a successful coping mechanism, they don't want to change. Why would they want to change? It's an ego construct that pays off for them every day. Nobody else, though, doesn't pay off for anyone else around
Right.
them. But so a lot of people, they're going through a divorce with a narcissist. So there's a lot of crazy trauma that's happened that is just, they want to talk to somebody that is like 100% confidential as
Right.
clergy, but also has heard all this stuff before.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, that
So
makes
that's what I
sense.
get.
That makes sense.
Yeah, that's what I get.
Um,
Because otherwise, you would just be going, this is all just a crazy, crazy story you're telling me. But if you've got experience with narcissists,
yeah,
it's
I've
like
seen it
that's
myself
par
for
for the
yeah,
course.
for sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
Talk to me about what a doctor of divinity is, what that schooling is like, why you decided that was something you wanted to pursue. Uh, I'm just personally fascinated. I don't know how many people listening are, but I'm sure that if I'm fascinated, I'm sure
Okay.
there's someone
Sure.
else who is.
Sure. So it was about 35 years ago that I started teaching yoga and guided meditation at a place called the King Ranch in King City, Ontario. It was owned by the Koffler family, and they own Shoppers Drug Mart. So it was a very kind of a medical background, and they had some of the best in the world come and train us from the Canyon Ranch. And just from there and doing the yoga with people and dealing with people, it just kind of grew from there. And then I got my Reiki attunements, became a Reiki master, and started doing that stuff and spiritual coaching within the New Age expos and all that great stuff in the 90s. And then eventually I went to University of Sedona to become a minister, and then the next thing that you do after that is your master's and then your doctor of divinity. So my dissertation for my doctorate was on the power of prayer in theory and practice. So scientific evidence that prayer works to change things for the better, that religious people live longer, all that great
Well, share
stuff.
some of those
And
findings. That sounds interesting.
sorry.
Share some of the findings about the scientific proof.
Well, the biggest thing was that the people that believe in God and that are religious, they live approximately. It depends on the study, but it's anywhere between 4 and 9 years longer. And if you get into things like the Christian Science denomination, they have tons of scientific studies that just show that people praying for people to heal, praying for others to heal, it all works. They actually did prayer studies where they prayed across from I think it was around Boston to Russia
Mm-hmm.
to move things within, it was like a deep blue kind of a computer with prayer, and it would do it. So it's like it's all there. It's what Reiki is based on, and that's all the studies are there that it works as well. It's very common in the United Kingdom to have a Reiki master on staff that sits there and Reikis people while they're getting surgery, and the doctor. Like,
I
these are
didn't
all
know
things
that they
that
actually
work.
do that within the
Yeah,
hospital setting.
yeah, yeah.
Wow.
Absolutely. And that's in the States, that's starting to, but
Really? No
these
kidding.
things take time to be accepted, I guess
Right.
the word is,
It's so funny. There's right, because I just to play devil's advocate, which is such a funny phrase, but for the conversation, but the classic rebuttal to stuff like this that you would hear as well, correlation doesn't prove causation, right? So yeah,
Okay.
but here's the thing. In my own practice, what I found is, and I'm interviewing therapists all the time and
Hmm.
psychiatrists, almost everyone in the couples counseling world adopts the five love languages by Dr. Gary Chapman, who does have a religious background. And there's zero proof that that's real. But why do we do it? Because
That's right.
it resonates with us.
Because it
And
resonates,
when you try
exactly.
it, it works. I mean, 100% of the time, there is some truth. So it's like, the question of what kind of the threshold for empirical data before you start adopting things is so interesting. It's like, well, who
Yeah,
put that label on, like, we need this over 100 years? It's like, look, it's clearly working. And it gets to the point where, the doctor's like, look, we can't deny that we don't understand it, but it
that's right.
has an effect. So until we can figure out,
That's right.
okay, it's not doing any harm, right? That's the
That's
first
right.
level. It's like if
There was
there's
a
no
Dr.
harm, right?
Larry there was a Dr. Larry Dossie who I used a lot of his stuff in. He is an MD and a cardiac surgeon in the
Yeah,
States, and he was devout, and he would always pray for his patients before, or pray with them if they
sure.
believed. And they studied it, and it was huge. Like the percentage of being successful with what he did was so far and above. And it kind of opened it up to him that he wanted to study it as well. And his books are just full of data.
Amazing.
So, it's all out there. There's at least 1,500 studies that they've compiled, like Newsmax, one of the news. Uh,
Aggregates, yeah.
yeah, 1,500 studies that show it works, you live longer, and you're healthier.
Right.
So for me, that's good enough. So that's good enough for me, right?
Yeah, for sure. I remember one time, and this was probably one of the most illuminating insights into one of my atheist friends that I had in my life. And it was such a dismissive little moment, but it really spoke to me. I was having Shabbat dinner. I often have guests come over. Friday night,
Yep.
my wife's an amazing cook. And so we had him over. It was the first time we had him over. And his wife was there, and his dad was, I believe his dad was a Holocaust survivor, kind of very young.
Hmm.
And, there was a lot, and my grandfather was as well. And that stripped him of any kind of belief in a God because of the trauma he saw. He just couldn't,
Sure, of
grapple with
course.
that. So I kind of got where he was coming from. And in the middle of dinner, he turned to me kind of unprovoked, and out of nowhere, he said, "Do you really believe in God?" And I said, "Yeah, I do." And he said, "Do you really feel like you have a relationship?" And I told him, I said, "Honestly, especially at the time, I was much more consistent about my prayer and stuff. And I
Hmm.
think if I do believe in faith, the purpose for me, at least, of having you on the show today is to remind me, like, you should talk a little more to God." So
Just in the
yeah,
morning when you get up,
yeah.
first thing, do it before you even get out of bed. If you make that
Part of
a
my
rule,
part of my routine, yeah, for
yeah,
sure, for sure.
yeah.
So anyway, so he asked me, and at the time I was much more consistent. I used to put on phylacteries to fill in and all this stuff every single day, and I was like, my relation, if I'm being candid, I said my relationship with God is probably the closest one I have in my life. It's more real than my relationship to my wife. And he
Hmm.
went, "Huh." And I thought he was judging, and there was this long pause because I've learned shut up at a certain point in the conversation, just wait
Sure.
to hear what the person says. And he leans in and he says, "I wish I had that." And that came from, as
Right. That's
atheist
nice.
as a person, as he's like,
Hmm.
because he saw the comfort, he saw the resolution that I had in my own being with that relationship. He's like, "I don't have that. I just have this nothingness." And it's
Yeah.
painful for him, and it was so interesting. And that was him being honest in a private, like, I don't think he could do that in a work setting, but like in the confines of
Right.
a safe space, he was like, "I wish I had that." So it was really interesting.
I think a lot of people don't understand what God is. I think that's the biggest problem. Like, people don't understand that when you get a gut instinct, when you get an intuition, that's God talking to you. That's your guardian angel talking to you. I also believe we all have a guardian angel that we can talk to at any time, that's set above us. It's right in the Bible.
Mhm.
It's
So how do you develop these relationships with God or with your guardian angel? Just through prayer, essentially?
No, they have to there's a few things. It takes a while, right? Like, you have to really meditation is always fantastic, prayer is fantastic. There's a lot. That's why I'm writing this book.
Mhm.
You just asked me why I'm writing this book, this course that I'm
Yeah.
writing,
What's it called, by the
because
way?
it's called The Spiritual Seeker's Guide to Practical Prayer. Right? Because it's like, I've done it for all denominations. Everybody can connect with God, and everybody can connect with the angels.
Mhm.
That's the same in any religion. And so if we can just get that going, guys, let's go. Get this world cleaned up, because it's been ridiculous. The last 3 years have been brutal.
Yeah.
And, we need to turn this ship around, and we can do it, but we have to get enough people doing it. And that's the thing. I think a lot of people have lost hope think a lot of people have put their uh, I don't know. They've believed things that maybe weren't correct. A lot of stuff has happened over the last few years that's all coming out now. I think we're in for a pretty interesting ride over the next little while.
Yeah. Well, I had a question for you before I
Yep.
let you go. What does, because I know you're non-denominational, right? As a spiritual,
No, the denomination is metaphysical.
excuse me, sorry.
Metaphysical isn't non-denominational.
So you're
Yeah.
metaphysical, but that means that you can do
Yep.
blended marriages and you can do.
Yeah, that we embrace all faiths. That's what
So
it
I
is.
haven't
That
had
we
the
learn about all
I haven't
faiths.
had the pleasure of being at a service that is done by a metaphysical reverend. What does that look like?
Oh, sure. You mean when we do
Like a wedding or a service?
service?
Yeah. What does it look like?
Yeah, well, depending on what the client wants,
Uh-huh.
right? Like a lot of the time, do they want me to talk about God? Do they want me to talk about, do they call it the universal life force?
Right.
Do they call it, do you know what I
Yeah.
mean? So when I'm doing services for somebody, I will reflect what their, the way that they connect is. For myself, I will talk about God all day long and I'll talk about the angels all day long. I don't personally bring Jesus into it because I find that it gets confusing for people
Mm-hmm.
that are Jewish or that are Muslim or whatever. I want us all to pray together and we all believe in God. So that's what I want. I'm trying to bring people together because I think that a lot of modern day they're trying to divide us all and I think it's the worst thing that can happen. I think what we need now is love thy neighbor energy to just raise it up all around the world and I think that we can do anything. And it's obvious that people are far more powerful than they believe. And if they would ask God to help them, I think that they would make some fantastic things happen. So I think that we're on our way. It's just we're slowly cracking through the shell. There was a while there where people wanted to be kind of like with religion, but I think with how the world has gotten, that people are starting to wake up to the fact that maybe we need some supernatural help here
Yeah.
because,
Yeah.
enough
Yeah.
said.
Well, Reverend Dr. Tracy Cox, thank you so much for joining us. If you want to reach out to Tracy, get some coaching, or if you're in Ontario and you want some assistance in spiritual ceremonies, you can go to Reverend Dr. Is it Reverend D?
Reverend Dr. TracyCox.com.
So it's
Yep.
REVDR TracyCox.com.
Exactly. And I work with people worldwide through the internet, so it's no problem. I have clients all over the world. And it's what I love to do. I love to help people. I love to talk them off the ledge. That's what I'm good at. And it's fun to do it and get people's lives going in the right direction.
Thanks again for being here. That's amazing. And I wish you all the best. And I know that there are people out there who desperately could use your help. And you seem like a great help to the right people. Absolutely. If you're interested in learning how to get the absolute most out of your romantic relationships, then you're in luck because I have put together a free workshop or masterclass, if you will, about 3 secrets that people in happy relationships have discovered. You can view the workshop at mrspirituality.com/3secrets. Again, it's completely free. Just go there and watch it. It'll help you on your journey, give you some wisdom, some things to think about. The website again is mrspirituality.com/3secrets. That's mrspirituality.com/3, the word secrets. It's all yours. Enjoy.